everyone, welcome back to Design Like a Pro. I'm Nikki, and today I'm going to share with you part 2 of designing calendars. In this episode, I'm going to take a highly requested tutorial, and this is talking about planners. In the previous tutorial, I showed you how to do a simple one-page calendar. In this one, we are going to take it to the next level and really look at how to design pages for a planner. Now, planners come in all shapes and sizes, so this is just going to give you the core skills that you need to really start thinking about how to lay out your pages, and then you can take it from there and continue to design your planner pages the way that you see fit, change the size to what you would like to use. The size that I'm using here is a standard A5 or letter size in the US. This is a very large size to use, but it's really nice because you can print these out, put them in a binder, make a planner really quickly if you would like to do this on your own. So let's go ahead and get started. This is a look at what we are designing today. As you can see, it's very simple, black and white, but we are just focusing on how to get this layout in place. You can jazz it up as you would like. So things to note here is that we are really going to be working on tables again, a lot more than we were in the previous lesson. So this is really going to beef up your skills in InDesign in regards to tables. I'm using the latest version of InDesign. You are free to use whatever you have. Just know that later versions of InDesign have really made working with tables easier. So there may be some features that I use that you may not have access to in an older version of InDesign. Okay, so let's go ahead and start by creating a new document here. Okay, so a couple things to note. Again, we're working with a standard A5 or US letter size here, but we are creating 2 pages of our planner, one for the left and one for the right. So we need to think about that when we are determining the page size. Really all that we're doing is we are doubling the width of our page size because we essentially are having 2 sheets of paper next to each other, but we're designing it all on one quote spread so that we know what we're doing with our pages. So the only difference here is that we would change the width to 17 inches. And again, I'm using the US letter size here, but you can use pre-made page sizes. So if you're in any other country, you may want to use A5 for this, but I'm going to move up to tabloid because we're actually doubling the size. So you can see here that it doubled it to 17 inches width, and then our height is going to be 11 inches. So basically we took the 8.5 times 2 and we kept the height the same. And in this case, we're not going to set a bleed. If you're getting really fancy with your design or you have a background color other than white that's going to go off the page, you definitely want to go ahead and set this bleed size so that you have that ready to go. I'm going to uncheck facing pages. We're going to work on 1 month, but obviously you would just be duplicating this again and again once you get the 1 month set. Okay, so now we're ready to go. So now we have our sheet. Again, this is actually going to be 2 sheets. We're just designing our entire planner spread on one sheet. It makes it a lot easier. So the first thing that I do is I throw some guides on here because it really helps me determine what's on the left and what's on the right. And it's also going to help us know exactly where that center is or where the fold may be or where our pages are going to be cut in half so that we don't put any content there. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a guide. If you don't see your ruler, go ahead and hit Control or Command R. That toggles the ruler on and off. So I'm just going to drag it out and then I'm going to place it right in the center, which is in this case 8.5 inches. That's dead center of our document. And then I'm just going to drag 2 extra guides, one on each side, not particularly paying attention to dimensions. It's just that I like to have this little extra cushion. So this is sort of that center line that says, okay, if we're going to have 2 pages, we cut it in half, or if it's going to be folded, we have a little extra cushion on that fold line to keep content away from it. Okay, so now we can start placing our items. The first thing that I like to do is throw in the title of the month just to start figuring out what kind of size we want to work with, and then we know where we can put the table for the actual days. So I'm going to type out the word January here and just sort of pick a font and bump up this size to about 50. And then clean up the text box and just put this in the upper left corner. Now you can see I have a box here. I do not like to see the boxes when I'm designing, so oftentimes I'm in overprint preview, which just gets rid of all of the outlines of the items I'm working on, makes for a cleaner workspace. So now we have that. Now the next thing that I'm going to do is just put a little line underneath here. So we're just grabbing the line tool, and then we are going to give that a pretty hefty stroke. So let's go ahead and give that like a 6. There we go. And again, I'm just keeping everything black and white for simplicity's sake. And actually, sometimes you may want just a black and white, some black and white planner pages. And then I'm going to duplicate this line by just holding down Alt-Shift. And basically, that's going to allow us to do this. Take it straight to the other side, keep it in line with the other. So you're going to see as we work throughout this lesson that we're constantly thinking about what's on the left and the right, and we are aware of the gap in the middle of our document that's going to allow for us to have our separate pages. Okay, so whatever we're doing on the left, more often than not, we are going to duplicate it on the right. And I'm going to go ahead and take both of these lines and just shift click both of them, again holding down Alt Shift and pulling that all the way down to the bottom margin line here. So we have something like that. So you can see that I'm starting to frame in where our calendar is going to go. So the next step is I'm going to drop in the days of the week. Now, you may think we can just add this to the table by having a header, and that is very true. I like to have a little more control of design, so I actually throw this bar in here separately. It just allows me to design this outside of the table, which in a lot of cases is a lot more flexible. So I'm going to take the rectangle tool, and we are just going to draw out a rectangle, and we may adjust this once we get the text in here, but this is just going to give us something to work with. And I'm going to create a new color swatch and have sort of like a light gray. Okay. And then again, we're going to duplicate this. Now, I'm going to actually stop duplicating at this stage because I would like to get one side done, and then we can duplicate that once all of the hard work of styling is done. Otherwise, you're essentially doing the work twice. But in this case, we're just going to grab the text tool, and I'm going to say Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and notes. You can see that I'm not paying much attention yet to styling. I am putting all 7 days and notes in this box because we can accommodate for the space when we have just a text box like this. It's a little more manual, but again, I prefer in this case just because I have more control. So we are going to go ahead and bump up that and go ahead and style this really quick. So I'm going to use a nice sans serif for this one, and we're going to all caps our days of the week. And then I'm going to bring this up into our box and then extend the text box all the way across. And we know that Thursday, Friday, and notes are going to be on this side. Okay. So until we get our table in place, it's really hard to know how to line these up with the actual squares. So I'm going to leave that for now. We'll come back and style the rest of that once we get our table in place. Okay, so the table is actually going to be extremely styled. I pushed the limit on this a little bit just to show you guys some more of the features of the table so you know exactly what's available to you, and it's pretty cool, all of the customizations that you have with the table. So the first step is to come up here to table and create a new table. Now we are going to create 2 tables. This is just going to be the easiest way to work. There is definitely a more advanced way where you can really fight with the middle of your document to get one table across the whole document. But if you're new to tables, that can get a little tricky. So I just want to show you how to work with one table on the left, one table on the right. Makes it a little bit easier. So if that's the case, we want to think about how many rows that we're going to have and how many columns we're going to have. So we're going to have 6 rows. and 4 columns. And the reason for 6 rows is there's some days of the month that carry over, and you can have 6 weeks in a month or 5 weeks in a month. It just depends on when the days fall. So you want to make sure that you're accommodating all of those scenarios. And then the 4 columns across account for the days of the week. And then on the other side, it's going to be the days of the week in the notes. And for now, we're not going to have a header or a footer, but if you would like to put these days of the week into your table, then you can go ahead and add a header row, and it just sort of makes it easier to do that. So I'm going to hit OK, and you can see that your icon changes, and we are going to draw out our table into the space that we have available. And there you have it. And what's nice about that is InDesign is going to adjust the cells of our table to fit how we told it the space that's available. So now we could just leave it like this, but it's kind of boring. And there's a lot more cool ways that we could style our strokes and our rows. We can have alternating colors, as you saw in the example. So how exactly do we do that? This is one of the nice things about the newer features in InDesign, guys, is that InDesign made this a lot easier than it used to be. So these features make tables a lot less daunting. So what I like to do first is set the core styling for my table and then go in and tweak exactly what I would want to do. So you can see that when you select your table, and this menu bar up here completely changes to give you a lot more features tied to your table. So the first thing that I'm going to do is actually come over here and click Style Options. And this is where you can set the style for your table, and it's going to be universal across the board as long as you continue to work in this table. So you have your general table setup where you can style the border if you want to. You can remove the border if you want to. We want to have a lot more control over our border. So I'm going to set the table border to 0 because I don't want an outer border all the way around the table. I just want specific borders along my columns, and then we're going to use alternating colors for the rows. So I don't want to have any borders around that. And here you can set your row strokes if you want to alternate. So you can set that here. We're going to style this manually, so I'm not going to use that. Same thing for column strokes. You can do alternate if you want to and get really fancy. Now we do want to set fills. This is where we are going to say every other row we want to have a specific fill. So the first row is just going to be paper color, and then the next row is going to be this light gray color. And we can have other settings if we want to, but that's sort of how we want this to work, where it goes every other one. And you can see that now our table automatically adjusted to every other one. And if that's too dark, you can come back in here and do 2 things. One, we picked the swatch color here, so you can actually adjust this if you want and hit preview, and you'll see that that's lightening up, so you don't actually have to go back into your settings if you choose a swatch that's already in existence. So we just lighten that up a bit. So it may be a little dark if you're writing on it, so we just want a faint color here. Okay, and you can see that now the border around our table is completely gone, but we're left with some inside borders that we want to go ahead and style. So the first thing that we want to do, again, is select this so that we get our options here. And we are going to completely get rid of the row stroke. So one thing we want to do is just select over here in this box the strokes that we want to work on. So the first one is the center one, and you can see that when you deselect all of them just by clicking them and then you come back and select the one that you want to work on, there is a setting here where before it didn't say that we had a stroke. So we're just dealing with this middle row stroke here, and we want to just go ahead and set that to 0, and you can see that it completely disappears now, and we only have the column strokes that we're dealing with. There are no rows. Because we're using the alternating colors, we're just deciding not to use a stroke on that. So now we're going to deselect that. We don't want to accidentally select this. This does take some time to get used to. I've messed with this so many times and accidentally selected a line and then it was styling it. So just take it slow and really look at what you're doing when you're selecting these. So the next step is to select the 3 columns, and then we're going to go ahead and style these. So we want to have this at like a 2 point, and you can see what you're doing over here. It shows you that what you have selected, so you can see the action here. And then we want to go ahead and make this a dotted line. And then we don't really want that to be black. We want that to be maybe just a darker gray. And if you see this pop up, I have this pop up all the time because I forget to uncheck this. So I'm adding swatches to my library all the time. But if you don't want to be adding every swatch to your CC library, just uncheck that. Okay, so then you can deselect here to see what it is that you're doing, and you can see that now we've got some cool dotted lines that are breaking up our columns, and then we still have our every other row colored. So that's kind of what we're looking at right now for just the styling of the table. There's a lot more that you can do, but this way you now know how to change the stroke of your columns and your rows and how to set alternating colors for your rows. Those are some of the key things for pretty much any table, not even just a planner. Okay, so once we have that set, now it's time to duplicate it across. So I'm going to hold down Alt-Shift, and we're going to duplicate this table across so that it's on the other side. And then we can come back up here and go ahead and style this so that the spacing is more in line with each column. So I'm just using a mix of tabs and spaces to get these where I want them to be. And again, you can see where if we would have just added this as part of the table, you might think that would have saved you a lot of time, which is true. But again, it's just kind of nice to have these separate because you don't have to style them with the table. You have just more flexibility. Okay, so when we basically, I want to center this up a little bit. That's sort of what we're doing. And just getting these so they're in the center of each of the columns. All right. Okay, once we have that, now what I'm wanting to do is go ahead and bold this just so they stand out a little more, and that might have adjusted the spacing. Anytime that you bold something or change the size, then your spacing gets a little bit off when you manually do this. Okay, so we have something like that. Perfect. Now I want this to not be touching that necessarily, so I'm going to bring up this box now a little bit closer, just so there's a definite separation. You can preview everything by hitting W and get an idea of how this is shaping up. And I'm actually going to extend this up this way a little bit. Okay, and then move the text box to the center. There we go. Just a little bit better spacing. Okay, so the next step is to style the notes column. I don't want the notes column to be exactly like the calendar here, so I actually want this to stand alone a little bit. And so much so that I'm going to change the font of this, and I don't want it to be part of this gray box. I would just like the days of the week to be part of it. So we're just going to take that back in, something like so. And then I want to get rid of all of the styling just in this column. So we're just going to click and drag, and we're basically selecting this column. And again, you can see all of the settings coming up here. So what we want to do is we want to select this. Again, I get in the habit of deselecting the strokes of the columns and the rows and then just selecting the ones that I want to deal with so that I don't accidentally change something I don't want to. So this right stroke we want to set to 0, and we don't have anything set in the middle. You could see that, but we do have a bottom stroke here, and we also have some alternating colors. So again, by selecting this, we want to go ahead and set the bottom stroke to 0. And now you can see that went away. And coming over here to swatches, we're going to set the colors of both the fill and the stroke just to make sure to none. And then you should see just a white empty column. Perfect. So now basically this column still exists, but we just deleted all of the styling for it. So it's blank, and then we can add in the stroke that we want to for our notes. So we could do that by taking the line tool again and just dragging this out, styling it the way that you want. Just thinking of like just sort of like a faint gray so that we can see what this looks like. That looks good. And then just holding down Alt-Shift, spacing this out the way that you want. And then once you get 3 of them on there, you can actually select all of them now and fill this in a lot faster. And so I'm using InDesign's guides here to help me space these evenly. When those green little lines pop up, and then you can see that all of these are spaced exactly the way that we want to. Take a quick preview by hitting W, and you can see that it's starting to shape up nicely. So there's really only one more step that we have, and that's to put in the numbers for our month. And the way to do that is you can place them directly into the cell of your calendar. It's going to make it a lot easier when you need to adjust that for the next month and the month after that. So one thing that you need to do is think about the styling of this. So in order to style all of your columns, you need to come over here. And it's faster if you think about the styling first and then drop your numbers in. I mean, you could drop your numbers in and then style them, but basically I want to do this kind of quickly first. So we're going to style this by setting the font and the size. We want that to be right aligned to our columns. We want the numbers to hang out over here. And then we're going to do the same thing on the other side, just to make sure that everything is styled appropriately. Okay, and then you could start placing your numbers where they should go. So the first was actually on a Friday, and then we're just going to keep clicking and placing our numbers quickly. Okay. So now we have all of our numbers in place. Now there's a couple of things that we can still continue to tweak here. One of them is that these numbers are awfully close to the edge here. So they really hug the stroke of the columns, and I'm a person that likes negative space around things. So how do you change that without having to go in here and manually adjust each number? Well, fortunately, InDesign makes this very, very easy because you can come over here and adjust the padding on your cell, basically, and add a little bit of an inset to just the area that you want to. So I'm going to come over here to the right cell insert, and we're just going to hit this a couple of times until it places it where you would like to for your spacing, and then do the same thing over here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then that gives us just nice spacing around our number. Now, if you don't want all of that spacing on the top, then you would deselect where it linked all of them up together, and then you can adjust everything. You could bring that up a little bit more if you want to, so that you have a little bit more space for the items that you want to put on the calendar. So there you have it, a somewhat quick way of getting your planner pages in place. And now you probably should be a pro at tables after this, especially with setting the styles, looking at placing strokes and alternate fills and things like that. Again, you can definitely take this technique now and just scale everything down the way that you would like to for the specific size that you would like for your planner. So if you want this to be a little bit smaller, you can do the same technique. It's just that all of your cells will be a little bit smaller. Now there's one more thing that I want to show you, and that's if you want to adjust the size of these cells. The quickest way to do that is come down to the bottom, and if you hold down Shift, you'll see that all of the cells adjust accordingly, and that way you're not editing them individually as if you selected it like that. So if you want to adjust them all, you come down here and grab the bottom, hold down Shift, and it's going to constrain all of those so that you can size them appropriately. This works really well if you, for example, make a really larger planner like this one, and then you want to make a smaller version of it without recreating everything. You can just copy it into your new document and scale those cells accordingly. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any questions about this lesson, please leave them in the comments below. I do my best to answer every single one that comes through. So please leave a comment if you have any questions. If you haven't already, please subscribe to stay up to date with all of the latest and greatest here at Design Like a Pro, and I will see you in the next episode.